All right, everybody, get ready, because today we are diving deep into the art of war.
Hmm.
And no, not some kind of modern take on military strategy. We're going all the way back to the OG, the oldest military treatise in the world.
Right.
We're talking Sun Tzu, using Lionel Giles's 1910 translation.
Okay.
And, you might be thinking, ancient battle plans.
Yeah.
How is that going to help me crush my Monday morning meeting?
Right.
But trust me, Sun Tzu's wisdom is surprisingly relevant,
Absolutely.
even thousands of years later.
What I find fascinating about the art of war is how it highlights these timeless truths about conflict and competition.
Right.
And it's not just about armies clashing on a battlefield.
Right.
These principles apply to any situation where you're trying to, achieve a goal.
Yeah.
Whether it's leading a team, negotiating a deal, or even just winning an argument.
Okay, so we are not talking about becoming a military mastermind.
Okay.
This is about understanding the underlying strategies for success.
Right.
And in any field, really.
Right.
So where do we even begin?
Well, Sun Tzu starts by laying out 5 fundamental factors
Okay.
that he believes govern war. Moral saw,
Okay.
heaven, earth,
All right.
the commander,
Mm-hmm.
and method and discipline.
And he calls these
He calls these the 5 constant factors.
5 constant factors?
Yeah.
Sounds pretty serious.
It is pretty serious.
Break it down for us.
Okay.
What does he mean by moral law?
Okay.
Is this about, like, fighting ethically?
It's actually more about the leader having the complete support of their people.
Mm.
Sun Tzu knew that, if your team isn't fully behind you,
Yeah.
if they don't trust your judgment
Right.
and believe in your mission, you're already at a disadvantage.
Makes sense.
Think about it.
Yeah.
Would you follow a leader you didn't trust into a difficult situation?
Definitely not. Exactly.
So moral law is less about being a saint
Right.
and more about building trust
Yes.
and unity within your team.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense.
Whether you are leading a company or a platoon.
Right.
Okay. What about heaven and earth?
Mm.
Those sound a little,
They do sound poetic.
yeah, abstract.
But Sun Tzu gets very practical here.
Okay.
He's talking about understanding your environment, the timing, and the terrain.
Okay.
In a modern context, heaven might be understanding the market trends, economic conditions, even the political climate,
Wow.
while earth is knowing your competition,
Okay.
their strengths, weaknesses, and potential moves.
So it's like doing your research before launching a new product.
Uh-huh.
You need to know what's hot in the market,
Right.
who your competitors are, and what they're offering.
Yeah.
And timing is everything.
Absolutely.
Launching at the wrong time could be disastrous.
Precisely.
Makes heaven and earth way less mystical and much more useful.
It does.
So we've got a strong leader with a united team.
Okay.
They understand the playing field.
Uh-huh.
What comes next?
Well, here's where Sun Tzu gets surprisingly modern.
Okay.
He was really concerned about the economic cost of war.
Not just the human toll. Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
He even talks about things like chariot maintenance costs.
He does.
Like I was thinking about the budget.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny to think about these ancient warlords worrying about logistics,
Right.
but it makes sense.
This shows his incredibly pragmatic approach.
Yeah.
He understood that drawn-out conflicts drain resources, time, money, manpower, and ultimately weaken your position.
Wow.
He even explicitly states that no country has ever benefited from prolonged warfare.
That's a powerful statement.
It is.
It makes you think about those projects at work that just seem to drag on forever.
Yeah.
You're pouring in resources,
Mm-hmm.
but are you really getting anywhere?
Good question.
Maybe Sun Tzu would say it's time to cut your losses and move on to something more promising.
It's about resource management. And that applies to any project, any endeavor.
Yeah.
Don't let things drag on unnecessarily.
Okay.
It gives your rivals an opening. Know when to press forward and when to conserve your strength.
Sun Tzu, the original efficiency expert.
I like it.
So we've got our leader, our team.
Mm-hmm.
They understand the environment.
Right.
They're managing their resources wisely.
Okay.
What is the next key to success, according to the art of war?
This is where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Sun Tzu considered defeating your enemy without even fighting to be the highest form of generalship.
Winning without fighting.
Yes.
That sounds almost impossible.
It does sound impossible.
How do you pull that off?
It's about being so strategic, so in control of the situation, that your opponent is essentially defeated before the battle even begins.
Okay, I'm intrigued, but still a little confused. Can you give us an example of what this winning without fighting actually looks like?
Think about it like a game of chess.
Okay.
A skilled chess player doesn't just react to their opponent's moves.
Right.
They anticipate them, they plan several steps ahead, and they set traps.
Oh.
Sun Tzu talks about disrupting your enemy's alliances, cutting off their supply lines, demoralizing their troops, all without a direct confrontation.
So it's about being proactive, about manipulating the situation to your advantage.
Yes.
Making it unfavorable for your opponent to even engage.
Exactly.
Wow.
He even lays out a hierarchy of approaches, with each one progressively less ideal. Balking the enemy's plans is the best.
Okay.
Followed by preventing alliances, then attacking in the field.
Right.
Sieges, he says, are the worst option because they're costly and inefficient.
I'm starting to see how this applies beyond the battlefield.
Yeah.
Imagine you're in a tough negotiation.
Okay.
Instead of going head-to-head, maybe you can subtly influence the other side's perception of their options, make them think they're getting a better deal than they actually are.
That's a perfect example. Or in a competitive business environment.
Okay.
You might focus on innovation and customer satisfaction to the point where your rivals struggle to keep up.
Yeah.
You're not directly attacking them.
Right.
But you're winning by outmaneuvering them.
That's such a powerful concept.
It is.
It's about being a step ahead, about understanding the psychology of your opponent and using it to shape the outcome.
Exactly.
Sun Tzu would be a killer negotiator.
He certainly had a knack for strategy.
He did.
And this leads us to another key concept.
Okay.
Deception. Sun Tzu famously said, all warfare is based on deception.
Okay, so we're not just being strategic.
Right.
We're also throwing in a bit of trickery.
He advocated for tactics like appearing weak when you're strong, or making the enemy believe you're far away when you're actually close.
Wow.
All about psychological manipulation.
Okay.
Think about a poker player bluffing their way to a win. It's all about controlling the narrative.
Right.
And shaping your opponent's perceptions.
It's like a magic trick.
Yeah.
You're misdirecting their attention, making them focus on something that's not actually a threat. Right.
While you're setting them up for the real play.
Exactly.
And I bet this applies to things like marketing and advertising, too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Think about a product launch campaign that deliberately leaks insider information to build anticipation.
Oh, wow.
Or a political campaign that uses carefully crafted messaging to influence public opinion. It's all about strategy and controlling the narrative.
So deception isn't just about being sneaky.
Right.
It's about understanding how information shapes perception.
Yes.
And using that to your advantage.
Exactly.
That's pretty deep.
And speaking of information,
Yeah.
this brings us to Sun Tzu's emphasis on intelligence gathering.
Okay.
He even had a whole system of espionage with 5 different types of spies.
5 types of spies.
Yeah.
It's intense.
It is pretty intense.
Did ancient China have like a spy academy?
Well, a spy academy would be fascinating. There's no evidence of that.
Oh, okay.
But he did have a very detailed system. For example, he valued converted spies.
These were enemy spies who were flipped to work for you,
Oh, wow.
providing valuable insights into the enemy's plans.
Okay, I can see how that would be helpful in a war.
Right.
But what about in a modern business context? You can't exactly go around recruiting double agents from your competitors.
That's where we need to adapt Sun Tzu's wisdom to our modern world.
Okay.
Instead of converted spies, think of sources of information like industry reports, competitor analysis, market research,
Okay.
and even networking with people who have insider knowledge.
So instead of cloak and dagger espionage,
Right.
we're talking about doing your due diligence, gathering as much information as possible before making a move.
Exactly.
Makes sense.
Sun Tzu understood that knowledge is power. The more you know about your opponent, their motivations, their strengths, their weaknesses,
Yeah.
the better equipped you are to outmaneuver them.
It's like in a game of chess.
Yes.
If you can anticipate your opponent's moves,
Right.
you can counter them effectively and set yourself up for a win.
Exactly.
But gathering intelligence is only part of the equation, right?
You're exactly right.
You also have to know how to use that information effectively.
And that's where Sun Tzu's tactical brilliance really shines. He gives us a lot to think about when it comes to maneuvering and positioning,
Okay.
both literally and figuratively.
So we're not just collecting information, we're
Yeah.
also learning how to apply it strategically.
Precisely. All right, let's look at chapter 6,
Okay.
where Sun Tzu talks about imposing your will on the enemy without letting them dictate your actions.
Okay.
He uses a fascinating analogy,
Okay.
comparing a skilled combatant to a shepherd driving a flock of sheep.
A shepherd and sheep.
Yes.
I'm not sure I follow.
The shepherd guides the sheep in the direction he wants, but the sheep have no idea where they're ultimately going.
Right.
It's about subtle control, influencing your opponent's movements without them realizing they're being manipulated.
So you're not forcing them into a specific action? Right.
You're subtly nudging them towards a position where you have the advantage.
Exactly.
Wow.
He talks about offering advantages to draw the enemy in, or inflicting minor damage to make them retreat.
Okay.
It's all about reading your opponent, understanding their psychology, and using that to your advantage.
It's like setting a trap.
Uh-huh.
You create an enticing situation that your opponent can't resist.
Right.
And then, bam,
Yes.
you spring the trap.
A very apt analogy.
Sun Tzu also stresses the importance of speed and surprise, appearing where the enemy least expects you.
He does.
He even says, appear at points which the enemy must hasten to defend, march swiftly to places where you are not expected.
That's a great quote.
That sounds like some serious guerrilla warfare tactics.
It does.
But I can see how this applies to business, too.
Yeah.
If you launch a product in an unexpected market or target an unanticipated demographic,
right,
you can catch your competitors off guard.
Absolutely.
And gain a foothold before they even realize what's happening. That's a brilliant application. And it highlights how Sun Tzu's principles transcend the battlefield. It's all about understanding the psychology of your opponent and using that to your advantage.
But this idea of imposing your will seems a little aggressive. What about situations where it's better to avoid confrontation altogether?
Sun Tzu was a pragmatist.
Okay.
And he understood that sometimes the most strategic move is to not engage directly.
So knowing when to fight and when to hold back.
Exactly. He says, if we wish to fight, the enemy can be forced to an engagement even though he be sheltered behind a high rampart in a deep ditch.
Wow.
Meaning, you can make them fight on your terms.
Right.
But he also says, if we do not wish to fight, we can prevent the enemy from engaging us, even though the lines of our encampment be merely traced out on the ground.
So it's about having the power to choose to engage or disengage based on what serves your strategic goals.
Exactly.
And it's not just about avoiding unnecessary fights.
Right.
It's about dictating the terms of the engagement.
Precisely.
Wow.
And part of choosing your battles wisely is understanding the battlefield itself. Sun Tzu devotes a whole chapter to different types of terrain and how to utilize them to your advantage.
He gets really specific, talking about everything from accessible ground to narrow passes to precipitous heights.
He does.
It's amazing how much detail he goes into.
He understood that the environment can be a powerful ally or a formidable obstacle, depending on how you use it.
Yeah.
Knowing the terrain, your opponent's position relative to yours, and how to maneuver effectively can give you a significant advantage.
It's like that saying, location, location, location.
Exactly.
It's not just about the space itself. It's about how you utilize it.
Precisely.
But even with all this knowledge, all this strategy, things can still go wrong, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
Even the best laid plans can be thwarted by unexpected circumstances.
Right.
Or human error.
Makes sense.
And Sun Tzu doesn't shy away from addressing the potential pitfalls that can lead to defeat.
So he's not just a brilliant strategist, he's also a realist.
Absolutely. In Chapter 8, he outlines 5 dangerous faults that can affect a general recklessness, cowardice,
all right,
a hasty temper, a delicate sense of honor, and over-solicitude for one's men.
Okay, those sound like pretty serious flaws.
They are pretty serious.
Break it down for us. What does he mean by each of these?
All right.
And how can we avoid falling into these traps ourselves?
All right, so we're talking about those 5 dangerous faults.
Yeah, those flaws that can trip up even the most skilled leader.
Right, and it seems like Sun Tzu was really tuned in to the human element of leadership.
He understood that even with the best strategies, the best laid plans, human emotions and weaknesses can undermine everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's break down these faults one by one.
Okay.
First up, recklessness. What did Sun Tzu mean by this? And how can we avoid it in our own lives?
Well, think of a leader who charges into every situation without considering the consequences. Someone who's impulsive and overly aggressive.
Right.
Sun Tzu warns that this kind of recklessness can lead to destruction.
Yeah.
It's about taking calculated risks, not blindly rushing into danger.
So it's not about being afraid to take risks. It's about weighing the potential rewards against the potential consequences.
Exactly.
It's about making informed decisions, not acting on a whim. I've definitely seen leaders who let their ego or their emotions get the better of them.
Right.
And it rarely ends well.
It rarely does.
And on the opposite end of the spectrum, we have cowardice, which Sun Tzu says can lead to capture.
Right.
This isn't about physical courage.
No.
It's about the mental fortitude to stand your ground,
Yeah.
to make tough decisions even when they're unpopular.
Exactly.
So it's about having the backbone to do what's necessary even when it's difficult or scary. It's about not letting fear paralyze you into inaction.
Precisely.
And then we have the hasty temper. Think of a leader who's easily provoked, who makes decisions based on anger or frustration rather than logic and reason.
Right. Sun Tzu warns that this can lead to rash actions and costly mistakes.
I know a few people like that. It's
Yeah.
like they can't take a step back and assess the situation calmly. They just react emotionally.
Yeah.
And it often creates more problems than it solves.
It's about maintaining composure under pressure, about not letting your emotions cloud your judgment.
Right. And then we have a delicate sense of honor, which
Yeah.
might seem like a strange flaw for a general.
It does seem strange.
Yeah, wouldn't you want a leader who's honorable? What's wrong with that?
It's not that honor itself is a bad thing, but Sun Tzu warns against letting your sense of honor dictate your actions to the point where it becomes a liability.
Okay.
A leader with a delicate sense of honor might be too quick to take offense,
Right.
might feel compelled to respond to every slight, even if it's strategically disadvantageous.
So it's about not letting your pride or your ego drive your decisions. Sometimes it's better to swallow your pride and choose the strategic option,
Right.
even if it doesn't feel as satisfying in the moment.
Exactly.
And finally, we have over-solicitude for one's men, which might sound like a positive trait.
It does.
But Sun Tzu cautions against letting your concern for your troops cloud your judgment. So it's about finding that balance between caring for your people and making tough decisions.
Yeah, sometimes you have to make choices that might not be popular, but are necessary for the greater good.
It's a lot to think about.
It is.
Sun Tzu really lays out the human side of leadership.
He does.
The challenges and pitfalls that every leader faces.
Yeah.
It's almost like a personality test for leadership.
Mm-hmm.
Are you reckless or cowardly,
Right.
quick-tempered, or overly concerned with your image?
It's about self-awareness, about understanding your own strengths and weaknesses,
Right.
and how they might influence your decisions.
And it's about having the discipline to control your emotions, to make rational choices, even when the pressure is on. So it's not just about mastering strategy and tactics.
Yeah.
It's about mastering yourself.
That's a great way to put it.
And this leads us to another fascinating aspect of the art of war,
Okay.
the importance of adaptability.
He compares military tactics to water, saying water shapes its course according to the nature of the ground over which it flows. The soldier works out his victory in relation to the foe whom he is facing.
So just like water flows around obstacles and adapts to the changing terrain, a skilled leader adapts their strategies to the situation at hand.
Exactly. And he goes on to say that just as water retains no constant shape, so in warfare, there are no constant conditions.
Wow.
This emphasis on adaptability is what makes the art of war so relevant even today. The world is constantly changing.
Right.
And to succeed, we must be able to adapt.
It's about being flexible,
Yeah.
about not being wedded to a particular plan or approach. Sometimes you have to change course midstream
Right.
to adjust your strategies based on new information or unexpected challenges.
And this requires a certain level of mental agility.
Yeah.
The ability to think on your feet, to assess the situation, and make adjustments as needed.
It's about being proactive, not reactive, about anticipating changes and responding effectively.
Precisely.
Sun Tzu was really ahead of his time.
He was.
This idea of adaptability is so crucial in today's fast-paced world.
Absolutely.
Things change so quickly, you have to be able to pivot, to adjust your strategies, to think outside the box.
And it's not just about reacting to external changes.
Right.
It's also about being willing to adapt your own approach.
Right.
To learn from your mistakes, to experiment with new ideas.
So far, we've covered a lot of ground.
Wow.
From the strategic brilliance of winning without fighting,
Right.
to the importance of intelligence gathering
Yeah.
and the human element of leadership.
Uh-huh.
Is there anything else Sun Tzu had to say that might surprise our listeners?
Well, he did have some rather fiery advice.
Okay.
In chapter 12, He delves into the strategic use of fire in warfare.
Okay, before we all go out and start bonfires, let's be clear, he's not advocating for mindless destruction, right?
Of course not. Sun Tzu was always a proponent of calculated action, of using force strategically and with purpose.
Okay.
He outlines 5 specific ways to use fire, focusing on disrupting the enemy's resources and morale rather than causing widespread destruction.
So it's more about targeted attacks aimed at weakening the enemy's position and undermining their ability to fight.
Exactly. Imagine the chaos and fear that would erupt if a fire broke out in an enemy camp, destroying their supplies, their equipment, their sense of security.
It would be devastating both logistically and psychologically.
Right.
But I'm guessing there's more to it than just setting things on fire.
Oh, there's a lot more to it.
Yeah.
Sun Tzu stresses the importance of timing preparation and understanding the environment.
Okay.
He even identifies specific days of the month based on the moon's position and the likelihood of wind, which he believes were ideal for starting fires.
That's some next-level planning.
It is.
He's thinking about everything. The weather, the terrain, the enemy's psychology.
He's not just setting fires. He's orchestrating a strategic maneuver.
Precisely. And he lays out 5 possible developments that could occur during a fire attack and how to respond to each one, highlighting his incredibly methodical approach.
Wow.
He wanted his generals to be prepared for any eventuality.
He also emphasizes the importance of knowing which way the wind is blowing literally.
Right.
He says, when you start a fire, be not how you can. Beat to windward of it. Do not attack from the leeward.
Sound advice.
Right.
Whether you're on an ancient battlefield or just lighting a campfire.
Yeah.
But Sun Tzu's discussion of fire is about more than just the tactical use of flames.
Okay.
It also speaks to a broader theme that runs throughout the art of war, the importance of exploiting your opponent's weaknesses.
He's constantly emphasizing the need to attack where the enemy is vulnerable, whether that's physically, logistically, or psychologically.
Right.
It's about finding that weak link and exploiting it to your advantage.
He understood that victory comes not from brute force,
but from finding and exploiting your opponent's weak points.
It's like that saying, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link.
Exactly.
Find that weak link and you can break the entire chain.
And this principle can be applied to any form of competition.
Right.
Whether it's a military campaign, a business negotiation, or even a sporting event.
So after this deep dive into the art of war, what's the big takeaway for our listeners? What should they be thinking about?
I think the most important lesson is the power of strategic thinking. Sun Tzu was a master strategist, and his insights are just as relevant today as they were centuries ago.
Yeah.
Whether you're leading a team, negotiating a deal, or simply trying to navigate the complexities of life, thinking strategically can give you a significant advantage.
He's basically saying don't just react to the situation, actively shape it. Be proactive, be strategic, and be adaptable.
Exactly. And it's about more than just winning. Sun Tzu's ultimate goal was to achieve victory with minimal cost and bloodshed.
Right.
He understood that true victory lies in preserving your resources and avoiding unnecessary conflict.
Yeah.
It's about winning wisely.
So it's about choosing your battles carefully, being strategic in your approach, and always being a step ahead of your opponent, even if that means winning without ever actually fighting.
Precisely. And while we might not face literal battlefields in our daily lives, the principles of the art of war can help us navigate the challenges we do encounter with greater wisdom, strategy, and ultimately success.
Well, after this deep dive, I'm feeling a lot more strategic.
I like it.
I might even go out and buy a go-board, practice my strategic thinking. But before I get too carried away, we have to ask our listeners, in your life, where could you apply Sun Tzu's principles?
Yeah.
Are you prepared to win without fighting? What kind of intel do you need to gather to make a strategic decision? Think about it and join us next time as we delve into the fascinating world of mention a completely different topic.